When you say your book, let's talk a little bit about that. Your book, I heard, has been censored in certain places, or it's been removed from its listing. What's been going on with it?
There's been so much going on with this book. There are at least 3 interviews that I've done, full interviews, recorded, everything, where the host just loves me. But we're not talking like, for example, YouTube. We're talking about companies where the host presents it to the higher levels, and then at the higher levels, I kill it the last second because they don't like it. It's too positive on Trump. There was an online bookseller. I guess you could guess who they are, but they actually removed the 5-star reviews from the book. And when presented with that, they just said, "Oh, it's just a glitch. It was just a glitch." I have had book signings that were already scheduled at bookstores that got canceled because of this. In short, the reason why I think the book is so interesting and I'm more dangerous to them, I actually spent time with Trump. And it wasn't just me being buddy-buddy with him, but I was the fly on the wall. I would spend hours with him, sometimes never even speaking hardly a word to them because I'm watching Trump and I'm taking his picture. So I can see how he interacted with people. He's not a racist. He's a wonderful person. He's charming, and he gets things done. And people don't want to hear that at all.
That's unfortunate, but honestly, not surprising. With where we're going, anti-Trump is what is mostly. It's what the mainstream and the powers that be are currently pushing forward and trying to dismantle, right?
Right.
Rather than actually shine a positive light on Trump. You can't talk about anything positive that he's doing and have it be okay. And furthermore, this is another thing, Gene, your book, which I'll hold up right here for all of you guys, be sure to check it out in the link below.
Thank you.
Your book is also rooted in Christian values and biblical principles. I won't say Christian.
Right.
Not Christian myself. So it's like, I'm looking at this and you're not just saying, oh, well, this was godly and divine intervention. No,
right.
You are citing real scripture. And that also is not favorable to what people want to hear. Because here's the thing, Gene, I think you married 2 amazing things together, which is, the scripture and some of the biblical principles and how Trump's presidency took effect. And the thing is, we've been a country that has slowly moved away from that. People want to take out God from the equation, which is why we can justify infanticides and abortion and all of these things, right? It's not because that's where we're headed with progressive thinking. It's because we took God out of the equation. So you took the 2 things in America that you can't really celebrate openly as much, and you put them together. And that's my theory. I think that's why.
Zach, here's the thing. I didn't need to lie. I didn't need to lie either way. I didn't need to lie and make Trump look like he was the best thing in the world. And really in the book, I don't. I just tell what I saw and compare it to biblical characters that sometimes were good and sometimes they did bad things. But here's the thing, Zach. If there are authors right now that are getting 7-figure advances to tell their stories, I'm not going to call them a liar, but they go negative, and the book sells 7 figures, $1 million in advance to write some of these books. I didn't need to write. I didn't need to make up things. And the other thing about it is, the first thing people say, well, how could you say that Trump is doing this or he's from God or whatever? The whole book of the Bible is about real people that either changed or did something for God. God used Rahab, a prostitute, to fulfill his purpose. Whatever God wants to do, he can do. But the one thing I tell you that Trump has done, at least for me, and possibly for you, and like Brandon Straka and Diamond Silk, he gave us the courage. And one thing that people are afraid of is a very strong Christian that is not afraid. The world has made the Christians that we're all these little sheep that are afraid to speak our minds. But Trump has given us energy. He has empowered us because we're not afraid anymore. We'll say what we believe, and we don't care. We don't care if the people don't like it.
Yeah, and I think that I think that a family member of mine, weirdly enough, before I read your book, I haven't finished reading it. I'm reading through it, but before this, I have a close uncle, a close Taiwanese uncle, who said that Trump getting elected was divine intervention. And he didn't vote for Trump. He voted for Gary Johnson. But he's he was that guy. But he said that to me, and he was following it closely, because I think implicitly we kind of knew where we were going, but nobody could quite put a finger on it. And he said that. And the thing is, you're comparing him, and that's the thing. It's like, you're not comparing him to Jesus. He's not the Messiah. It's just characters in the Bible. They're fundamentally flawed. I mean, David was not a perfect individual, and neither was his son. And
Right.
I think that the strong Christian values that are pushed forward, I think, are what has empowered a lot of us, whether you are a believer, or a Christian or not. But I think, most importantly, saying things and knowing that you're imperfect. I can't stand behind everything he said. There's some things that our president has said that I can't support, but that's okay. I accept the fact that he is not a messianic figure like we prop up people like Obama to be. They're not. He's imperfect, and his mistakes are out in the open, on record. And I think that that's part of it. I think that that's okay. I think we can actually go, well, no, he stands for something bigger, but he's not perfect. The guy stumbles every once in a while.
That is perhaps Zach, that is perhaps the strongest tying point of the book.
Yeah.
Because when you read the book, and basically I talk about some things that I saw Trump do, and then I tied it in with Bible characters, and some are good and some are bad that did similar things. But the point is, what it encourages us to do, and it doesn't make any claims that says, oh, Trump's a Christian. He says he is, and I believe him. But my point is, when it comes to stuff like that, it opens the way for all of us to realize, we are not the people that God is actually like connecting with nowadays are not what we would consider the best people, Christians in the world. Even like myself, I think about it many times. If God can use someone like Donald Trump with all his greatness and also with all the things that people say and point to that says he can't be from God because he does this or that, it just shows us that God can open the door for all of us if we just open the door for him.
That's absolutely true. And sometimes as Christians, I think we have to forget, like, we have to remind ourselves that, like, Rahab's a great example. God used a prostitute. And I think that unfortunately we get, there's a bit of in conservative circles, especially with Christianity, there's a little bit of a holier than thou type mindset.
Right.
That because you think that way, you're actually blinded to what the greater goal is here. God can use anybody, right? It's not limited to somebody who believes in him or not. And that's, I think that that's the takeaway. But I also think that the takeaway here is that he is not somebody who came from the perspective of a private life. I don't think he was ever afforded that. A lot of these people aren't. And I think that what Trump has changed in the landscape of politics is that you don't have to be, you don't actually, I think that that age of politicians and leaders being infallible has gone by. And people have to be, it's like locker room talk. I'm a Christian. Believe me, I have said things like that. I have made lewd, embarrassing, rude comments like that. The only difference is it wasn't on record. So,
right.
you know what I mean? It's like, I have talked the way Donald Trump has talked. I have probably said insulting things to women as well, either in a funny or an insulting way. Just because they're not on record doesn't mean I'm exempt.
I think about this going back because I followed the whole campaign. Really, honestly, if you can think, like, if I was speaking for God and God said to me, which one of these Republicans here do you think I've selected? I'll tell you this much. The way better choice than most people would think, Ben Carson, who I've met, that guy was like the best choice. I just got off the show with Governor Mike Huckabee. Mm-hmm. That guy, who is a great governor and is used by God, I believe, but Huckabee is another great and wonderful choice. And it doesn't take anything away from them or whatever. Mm-hmm. But with what it is that I believe empowers us today, the vast majority of the people, is that we have someone that has empowered us and made us so that we can be Christians, but we don't have to be the meek Christians that are just going to be like, that they once sat in a corner.
Mm-hmm.
We can be outspoken, and we can be strong, and we can tell other people about what we believe and stand firm in it.
Yeah. And I think that I'm starting to get a better grasp on that as well. And I think that the individual can stand for values, but not necessarily have to be perfect in all of those things, because that's impossible. You know, we're created flawed and all of that. But I think that America right now, with people who we deem leaders and politicians, people we follow, we do that. We unfortunately conflate the idea of a person as if it was separated from the individual itself. And I don't want to get too, metaphysical with it, but it's true. It's like even probably the most upfront, God-fearing, virtuous pastor has probably had his own hang-ups. He's been challenged in his faith. He's been tempted. He's probably done a few things here and there. The only difference is that it probably didn't erupt in a crazy scandal that put the reputation of his church in a compromising position. Like that's where we demonize people, is like, well, he was caught doing that, but it's like, I can't say that I'm any better than him. I've done some stupid stuff, and like that's the thing. I think that's really all it is. And unfortunately, when you take a religious position like being a Christian, I think it's further inflated. You're that pressure. It's almost like now you have to stand by every single thing that you speak of, and that's true. But we've made mistakes, and we've been caught, in our own hypocrisy, and it does happen. So I'm glad that you mentioned that, because it humanizes people, is what I'm saying.
I think, Zach, I think that's what it really boils down to. Because I mean, I grew up. Both my parents are Chinese, and they're from China. So I was a first generation American. But at the same time, when I grew up, like we didn't spend our Sundays at church. I didn't really start reading the Bible till later on in my life. My parents are wonderful people. They taught us, they taught me many good things. And it's not to say that we are excluding anybody, but it's just interesting. The type of people that are drawn to Trump are people that have been silent for a very, very long time. Silent politically, and even in many ways silent or secretly being a Christian because they're afraid to stand up for it based upon what other people might think. And I know that with my family as well. They are wonderful, but at the same time, I'm old enough to know now, and I'm not afraid. And I think that's what Trump has done. He's empowered us.
Yeah. Speaking of that, with your background and everything, what have you seen since in your travels around the country, not just promoting the book, but also with your presence at all of these rallies, from, say, the Chinese demographic? And I know that's the thing. I think what Paul mentioned to me was that you and I share this belief where, I don't think that, I don't want to say Asians as a whole, because a lot of our demographics don't always get along. We don't always believe in the same thing.
Correct.
But the Chinese are the biggest Asian demographic just within Asian Americans, if you want to call it that, which I've slowly stopped using that term in the United States. What have you witnessed? What have you witnessed with, I guess, Chinese people, Americans of Chinese descent? I mean, where do you find their support usually lies? A lot of them tend to be evangelical Christians from what I've come across in my life, but what are your thoughts on that?
Well, first of all, I could tell you what, at the rallies, there were groups, Chinese for Trump. There was a lot of Asian groups out there. Mm-hmm. And I think deep down inside, and maybe it's from my growing up, and I don't know about how it was with you, but I get the feeling it was similar. Mm-hmm. The Chinese community, or for me growing up, was very get along, whatever that phrase is, get along to go along, or whatever.
Agreeable. Yeah.
Yeah. That's how I grew up to be. Not to make waves at all, to be quiet and just kind of blend in with everyone else. Mm-hmm. And in many ways, I feel good about it. My last name is Ho, but my mom, as a first generation American, gave a lot of the Chinese moms did something that has helped us. They gave us Americanized names. Zach, Gene, there we keep our culture, and I love Chinese food and I love the Chinese culture a lot.
Yeah.
But at the same time, a lot of us have succeeded in America because we learned to blend in and we learned not to make waves. I'm not saying that's not a bad thing, but that is how I grew up as a Chinese person. Just don't make waves and so forth. But I think it's a time in my life, and I feel a lot of it, where it's time sometimes that you just have to stand up for what you believe. You have to go out there and just be not afraid to be who you are, regardless of what it is. And in this case, I believe in Jesus. I believe that Trump is a good leader and that we can learn a lot from. And the thing that he has taught me, Trump that is that you can't be afraid. We can't be the silent majority any longer. We have to speak up for what we believe. And I think that's the difference between the culture that was brought up with, and a lot of Chinese. Just get along, don't make waves, don't, just get along. And it's different now because people are starting to stand up, walk away.
Yeah. I have personally encountered a lot more Chinese, American-born Chinese folks, regardless of generation, that are undergoing similar transformations. Now, my story is a little bit different, Gene. My background is a lot of my family's been in the state of Arizona for almost 100 years. My great-grandfather came here in the early 20th century, late 19th century. So, and built businesses. We were the restaurant type, the laundromat, and the grocery store. That's like the big three of like what Chinese immigrants do in the very beginning when they come to this country. And my family, I only realized this recently, with the exception of a couple of people. Most of them are conservative. Most of them are like full-on, even registered Republicans. Now, you vote your values, right? Whether you want to vote left or right is up to you. But conservatism, that word in itself, which I've come to believe is a word that means above anything, above a political ideology, it means a respect for the freedoms that God gave you and being self-reliant. And then everything else around conservatism is just politics. It's just political ideology, whether it's Republican or Democrat or whatsoever. But conservatism is the driving force behind a lot of Asians in the United States, because our culture and what we're taught is actually very, very, it parallels a lot of those values. You work hard, you do your job, you go to a good school or whatever, and therefore you will succeed despite what you think your shortcomings may be, despite what you think. And when you say a lot of people are waking up, especially in the American Chinese community, I think that that's true, because I think that not only is the information out there, and there's been a bit of a movement of people who are being more outspoken now, but they're realizing that there's a generational shift now. It's like, it's okay to speak up. It's okay to still maintain noble pursuits and get a good job, but you're a conservative in every way, shape, or form because of your life. Maybe you decide to vote otherwise because of fear, because of conformism. But if you look at, like, that's the thing, that's why I think you'll appreciate this. I look at Asians, I look at especially the Chinese. Everything about your life screams conservative. From the way you behave, you get beaten down, but you don't really care. You just keep going. Like, everything about what you do is conservative.
I agree. I mean, that's how it was all through my life. I mean, I was someone, because it was early on, that, I mean, I grew up in school in the 70s and the 80s, and there was still a lot. I mean, the type of racism that I would face, it was way different from what it is today. But at the same time, that's what conservative people do. They just don't try not to let it bother them and move on from it. I just think that the main difference, which that's good, but I think the main difference is that I can no longer be silent and I can no longer be afraid, especially as I mean, I too am a business owner. I have a photography studio. And I know that a lot of business people, when we were on the campaign, they were secretly voting for Trump because they wanted that. They wanted those economic benefits from being what he said. But a lot of them were scared. They were scared to say that they were supporting Trump because they would be afraid of the backlash that they would get of a boycott or whatever. I mean, I'm at the point now where that doesn't bother me. If I believe something, I need to tell people what I believe and not be afraid, because I was. Honestly, it was a generation of cowardice or whatever, but like for the longest time, I never said what I really wanted to say or how I felt about things. And now that's the thing that changed.
Yeah, and I'm glad to see that we are slowly, as a demographic, moving in that direction. I will say this though, this is the unfortunate mistake that racial community groups make, and I hope that Asians don't make this mistake, simply because the nice thing, I will say this, is that Asians, from my experience, especially the Chinese, foster less of a victim mindset than other demographics of people. I'm just going to say it for what it is. We just do.
I know.
Which is why I think that if it comes to rallying conservative beliefs, right, the Chinese don't really have anything to prove. It says through your actions, through your success. But as long as they are outspoken and they vote their values and all of that, that will in turn slowly give way for a lot of other Asian communities and populations to follow that example. I personally don't really like even the idea. This is something that people have always bounced around. It's like, hey, you guys need to be conservatives. You need to be Asian conservatives and get everybody together and do that. And weirdly enough, I actually disagree with that. You know, we're Americans united in our values. And the thing that set the Asian demographic, the race aside from other races, is because they never made race the reason for why they did anything in the first place. It was never a reason for even why you were discriminated against or why you did succeed. So therefore, if you want a conservative movement of Asians, don't make it about Asians. Make it about what we do. And I mean, I don't like to bring this into the picture, but look at Jews. It's just like, you don't have to say that you're Chinese or Asian to be a conservative or to be successful, and you don't need to rally a group of Chinese only. Just like, you know, we don't need an NAACP or anything like that. I don't think that the Chinese need that at all. And when it comes to empowering other Asian communities, that's how it starts. It's just get a bunch of people voting their values that look alike, but they don't have to say that they're Chinese. They don't have to say that they're Asian. It's already implied. People can look at you and go, well, I've never seen someone like Gene talk like that. He looks like me and kind of sounds like me, but then he like decided to speak up. And I think that that's all it takes. That's the beautiful thing about it.
I really, really, really believe what you just said. And the thing is about it is, like I said, I know, like, if there are Chinese American Chinese listening that are younger, I know how it was growing up. And in many ways, it was like the best thing ever. I mean, I was brought up to get along with everybody, which is good. I mean, we have come as a people to the United States and fit in really, really nicely. We really did. We, as a people, contribute a lot to it. We get good educations. We work hard. We do a lot of good. But that's all good. But the only difference that we can take it over the top is just not to be with that mindset that I've had, that my mom and dad brought up with me. No, don't speak up, don't speak up. You know, don't make waves, don't make waves. I mean, there were so many. Now it's different now. My voice is getting a lot bigger now. And I've called out politicians before for both good and for bad. And my mom's always scared because I'm like calling out, whether it's the mayor or this politician or that. Oh, no, don't speak. I'm not as scared anymore. And that's the difference. And all it would take for our people that understand how we grew up is just to have that mindset. Just don't be scared. That's and right. Go out there, speak your mind, and then we'll get stronger together.
You're absolutely right. And we're lucky now. And the thing is, if for those young Asians or young Chinese who are listening to this, and we were brought up in a culture where we wouldn't, where, you know, you shouldn't speak up, you know where this is coming from, Gene, right? Is because traditionally in our background, especially the Chinese population who came to the United States, you came from a country where speaking up got you killed. So I don't blame you for bringing that with you. It's just that things are different now. If you're a young Chinese, young Asian in America, oh, this is your playground for free speech. And if you want to preserve free speech, I suggest you speak up. That's the thing. To preserve that First Amendment right, that constitutional value, would mean exercising it whenever you can. See,
Oh, wonderfully said.
right? It's just like it's the First Amendment in the Constitution for a reason. I mean, that's a right that this country has that no other country really freely encourages and reinforces. I mean, unfortunately, because of mainstream bias, you have problems here. But
Right.
that's the thing. It's like our parents, our grandparents, they came from China. Speaking up got you killed. Even Cambodia. If you came from Cambodia, Thailand, Malaysia, um, Japan, even a lot of these countries, if you Korea, you spoke up, and if it was different, if it was went against the status quo, it got you killed, which is why I don't blame our grandparents or our parents for thinking that way. But your kids don't have to be like that.
Right.
I have no real ties. I'm a proud ethnic Chinese American, right? But I have no ties to China. I barely know anything about like communist.
It's just so funny, our conversation earlier when we started. It's like you know, you speak Cantonese and you speak Mandarin.
I mean, I speak Mandarin. I can appreciate and still maintain the history and the culture of the ethnic background that I represent, right? But my values are strictly 100% American. I am not acting in the Chinese interest or anything because I don't know anything about it. I have as much ties to the Chinese homeland as a fourth generation German, Irish, Swedish American does to their countries. Do you think they know anything about Germany?
Oh my goodness,
Oh.
Zach! I'll tell you a really funny story, and this is true. We did it with all my children, and I can believe it. Like my children, by the time they make it into like first grade, the school that they go to they have this kind of history lesson on the plight of the Chinese Americans, you know, with the railroads in California. So they would, every single one of them, they come back home and then they would talk to my wife, who is white. So my children are mixed race, but when they come home, and they did it every single time, I'll never forget it. My wife goes, "Oh wow, do you know any people that are Chinese?" And they go, "No, well, no, they don't." My children didn't even realize that I was Chinese and they were half Chinese. I mean, it is that much of about my mindset is that yes, they eat all the food, they eat juk, they eat all the
Nice.
bao, you know, they eat all of that. We're fully ingrained in the culture, but at the same time, they are not people that have to have a title saying that they are Chinese Americans. As far as I'm concerned, we're growing up American, and the only difference is, and for the younger generation of Chinese, just to empower ourselves. You know, I know how I was taught growing up to, you know, just get along with everyone, to stand up for what you believe, or if you believe the opposite, stand up for the opposite if you want. But be strong and speak up.
That's amazing. And actually, I think that if by teaching your kids that, I think that you're already priming them to understand that a lot of these labels, which people should be proud of, are not necessarily applicable to character. And that's the thing. I think that it sounds like it unites you, right? By saying, I am this, 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 and this, and I belong to this group.
Right.
But it actually divides you a little bit, because does it really matter? And I don't say that to undersell or to discredit any experiences of prejudice or advancement of any group of people. But, you know, it's like in the sense of the word in itself, that's what it is. As an American with American values, we don't have to necessarily forget where we came from to know that this is what you are now. And I think that you can celebrate culture and you can still maintain that aspect of being Chinese, being white, or being whatever it may be, but understand that your national identity is tied here. And I think that it's taken me 24 years, that's how old I am, to kind of realize that I grew up overseas. I was born overseas.
You're a young man.
Yeah, but I've been around the world, and I think that I can honestly say I lived in China, I lived in Malaysia, I've lived in a Muslim country and a communist country, right? And I can say that you can have aspects of culture that you can enjoy, appreciate, and are inherently part of you. But I'm an American first and foremost. Like I don't, those are experiences, right? And I think that unfortunately, race almost feels like too much of a predetermined factor for what kind of individual you're going to be. And that is the problem. That is really the only thing. If you remove that, it doesn't mean you're dismissing the fact that you're Chinese. It's just that it doesn't.
Right.
I don't know. Crazy Rich Asians, believe it or not, I don't think needed the title Crazy Rich Asians. Why don't you just call it rich people doing their thing, right? The fact that they're Asians is already implied because phenotype, we can tell that you're Asian. You don't have to be redundant. That's my push for the younger generation. I always try to encourage young Asian activists or Asian commentators, like, just start talking. But don't say that you're Chinese. You know why? It's redundant. Black people don't have to say, I'm black, so I'm going to say this. The same, and it's the same thing with Chinese. Like, you don't have to. We can tell.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
That was awesome.
But that's what I'm hoping for my generation, for younger conservatives, is just do you, man. Just speak up.
I know. That's what I'm saying. Like, the interesting thing about it is, like, we really don't have, in our community, we don't need a leader. We're going to do our own thing. But just like my message and your message, just don't be afraid to stand up.
Don't be afraid. Yeah, it all comes back to just start talking, speak up. And the past few months for me, Gene, has just been the most amazing ride speaking up. I mean, I did lose some friends, but I mean, I'm grateful. I'm blessed.
Oh, honestly, congratulations on all your work you're doing with that. Like I said, I met Brandon Straka, and I met him at a Diamond and Silk event because I'm working with Diamond and Silk now. I do all that photography. So I'm very familiar with you even before my publicist reached out to you. But whatever you're doing, just keep it up because it helps.
Yeah, just for this interview, guys, I mean, we'll talk after this, Gene, but I just want to say thank you so much for coming on and for the interview. And for those of you who have not picked up Trumpography, be sure to do that before Amazon bans it. I don't think that'll happen, but I'll leave a link below, guys. Gene, can you inform the audience where they can find you and what things you're working on?
Yeah, you know what? The easiest way to find me is on my main website, is geneho.com. So it's GENEHO.com. And from there, you can see all the stuff, the other things I've done. You can see, it'll have a link to the book, for my book, Trumpography. And then from there, you can also try to find me on Facebook. There's a lot of neat pictures there as well.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for being
Thank you so much.
We really appreciate it. I'm glad we got acquainted. And guys, yeah, check out his book. Yeah, thanks, Gene, and I hope to talk to you soon.
Awesome. Thank you.